spent years struggling to achieve the best grades in DaVinci Resolve until I found this workflow. And now in this video, I'll be showing you the step-by-step process to achieving the best results. This isn't just a beginner's guide. I'll be showing you complex tools and techniques for professional color grades, but I'll explain them in a way that's easy to understand. Whether you're a beginner or a pro, this guide will teach you something new. Are you ready to make your videos look like they belong in a Hollywood movie? Get your pen and papers. By the end of this video, you're going to learn how to grade like a pro.
This video is actually going to be very in-depth, and I've put together around 10 different cameras, including the Blackmagic PYXIS 6K Pro that just came out, URSA Cine 12K, Samsung phones in both Rec 709 HDR10+, even iPhones too. So I'm sure this video is going to be really packed. To get things started, we're going to start with color management because that's like the most important thing. If you miss this, every other thing is going to be messed up. Let's quickly hop into DaVinci Resolve. Let me show you every single thing. So here we have 17 different clips across the 10 different cameras. Some are like duplicates and stuff. So let's go to our color page using Shift 6 or pressing the color page down here. If you click on the cog down here, you will see color management here. So we're going to put our color management on DaVinci Resolve YRGB here, DaVinci YRGB, and DaVinci Wide Gamma Intermediate. What this simply does is trying to tell your camera like, okay, everything all the different cameras have recorded, we are coming to a unified space where we can all work similarly. So you know that whatever you do here and whatever you do there, they are going to act fairly consistently. There are other color spaces which include AC, CC, and CCT, which we're not really going to use, but this is a very wide color space that we're going to be using. So you're going to come to your timeline color space and go to click DaVinci White Garment Intermediate. So that's DaVinci WG Intermediate, and the output color space will be Rec 709 2.4. If you do this, you're going to ensure that everything looks good at all times. The thing about color grading is that some people make a mistake of trying to do things just by your eyes, and that is actually technically very wrong. You need to use some form of consistent metrics to gauge your footage so that you ensure that no matter what screen you're watching it on, it looks reasonably good at all times. So now we're going to apply our scopes. So as you can see here, I've applied two different scopes. Actually, it might probably look like this. So you're going to click on one here. So you click on these two because we're going to be using our vector scope, and then we're going to be using our waveform. So under your vector scope, you probably come here and then you click colorize. You leave it as colorized. You make sure you click on show skin tone indicator, and then this is really optional, but I leave mine on 2x zoom. You close that, you come here, same thing here, and then you just make sure it's colorized, RGB. Some people use CB, but I like YRGB. And then I like keeping these lines here, these reference lines, which I'll talk about later on 20 and 190. Then lastly, you're going to come here and you click on display qualifier focus. This will allow so that when your cursor hovers on your image, it shows a focus on your graphs like this. Can you see how it's showing? So you know where your cursor is on your graph. What I'm about to explain to you is something a bit more advanced, but then it's good that you actually start the habit right now. So remember at the beginning, I said that we have about 10 different cameras across 17 different clips. Now, there's something called grouping your clips in DaVinci Resolve. So the best way to do that is this. Step one, we're going to highlight all our clips here. Just highlight all of them. And then we're going to move to use remote grades. The reason why you're using remote grades is so that if you have two clips, let's say you cut the clips and you have two of them on the same timeline, whatever you do on one clip affects the other clip as long as they are like the same clip. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you're going to use remote grade. And if you notice, if I click on some other clips, nothing is happening. But when I click on these two, you can see how they have this red icon on them telling you that they are basically clips from the same clip. Yes. So now that you're done with that, you can move further to the next step, which is actually grouping the clips. For instance, if I hold this clip here, you can see that this is our node here, which I will get into soon. Our nodes here, you have your timeline and then your clip level nodes. But now I'm going to show you something that's going to provide more nodes to work with. If I click here and I come down to groups, you see it's deactivated. If I say add into a new group and I call this Slog2 because that's what I shot this in. I shot it in Slog2. So Slog2. Now you see it creates two more. One here called group pre-clip. You have the clip and then a group post clip and then your timeline. The thing about what happens here is that whatever you do on the timeline affects all your clips no matter what. So, but when you do things on the pre-clip, the clip and the post clip, it only affects those clips under that group. And that's the important thing, so that you ensure that whatever you're doing here affects the rest and you don't have to keep on repeating processes. This clip now, as I've added it to the Slog2 group, this clip following it, this exact same clip, is also an S-Log2 footage. So I can come here and say, okay, group S-Log2 assigned to group. Now, these two groups, you can see that they have the same linking on them, telling you that they are linked in a group of some sort. If I move to the next clip, this is a Samsung footage in HDR10+. I right click on it and I'm going to say, okay, add it to a new group, and I'm going to call this HDR10+, a new group. So you can see as I'm clicking here, different settings apply. So let me just run through this. This clip is Rec 709, so I'm going to create a Rec 709. This is sRGB. This is iPhone. This is an iPhone footage in HLG. And then you're basically going to do this for all your clips. Just go put them in the right color space. But usually you don't have this many clips on your timeline. So that's the thing. This is S-Log3, iPhone group, iPhone HLG. This is Blackmagic RAW. So are these two clips here. Groups, Blackmagic RAW. Then also here, this is Rec 709 assigned to group alongside this one and this one assigned to group. Rec 7 assigned to group. And then we're going to go to assign this to. Now, all our clips are grouped, and you can see as I move through it, some of them are highlighting multiple selections. So moving forward in the color management, you can see that the footages still don't look good. As a matter of fact, you can see that they're kind of washed out, which is how some of your footages might be. So let's start with this one. What you're going to do is, in this pre-clip, you're going to do what we call color space transformation. So what color space transformation basically means is there's something your camera shot in, and then you're going to interpret that into something that DaVinci Resolve can understand, so that you get your tools reacting in the right order. You get what I'm saying? So to explain that further, we're going to go to our pre-clip and we're going to come under effect here. You're going to come to the search and you're going to look for something called CST, color space transform here. So you drag and drop this into this space and you're going to say input color space for this particular camera. Since this is a Sony S-Log3, you're going to use Sony S-Gamut 3.Cine, and then you're going to say your input color space, input gamma will now be Sony S-Log3. And you see the color changed, but it's still not looking so good. We're going to fix that soon. For your output color space, you're going to output it into your timeline color space. DaVinci Resolve, White Gamut, and DaVinci Resolve Gamut Intermediate. So we've changed it into our color space, our timeline color space. And then we're moving to the output here, which is going to be the group post clip. Like I said, you don't really want to do it on the timeline color space because sometimes you want to make some changes at the back end that you want to just affect a certain group. So it's a good habit to actually do it on the group post clip. So the exact same thing, you're going to add a color space transform, but this time around, you're going to pick it from DaVinci White Gamut and then DaVinci White Gamut. And then your output is going to be Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. The reason why you're doing 2.4 versus 2.2 is because you're going to be, we're assuming that you're posting to like, maybe you're making a film, something like that. You want the high quality. If you're doing 2.2, it's kind of like for web, like websites and stuff like that. So you can do some research on that. I'm actually saying nonsense, but like, I mean, this is the right thing to do. This is what I use and it gives me the best results. So as you can see, now our footage is looking much more presentable. You can actually look at our scopes here and you can see that as I do this with pressing Shift D, you can see that it's spreading out more, meaning that it has actually transformed into our display color space. Our display color space is Rec 709 2.4. That's what my system is using. And then coming from our camera color space, which was S-Log3, into our screen or our display color space, which is Rec 709. Now, if I do this for the rest of them, which I'm going to rush through briefly, for this one, Sony S-Gamut 3.Cine, S-Log2, DaVinci White Gamut, DaVinci White Gamut Intermediate. For this HDR10+, we're going to do Rec 2100, and then we're going to scroll down to, if you want to know what HDR10+ is, you can actually just check my video. I'll link it somewhere here, so you can check out my other video where I talked about it. sRGB. 2.4. For the iPhone video, I'm going to do Rec 2020, and I'm going to scroll down to HLG. That is Rec 2100 HLG. Yeah. For the Blackmagic footage, I'm going to go down to Blackmagic Design Video Gamut 4.5 and then Blackmagic Design Film Gen 5. Yeah. For the Rec 709 clips, you can see that as I've done the color transformation, even if I turn off my if I bypass it, pressing Shift D, nothing changes because we're still changing back to Rec 709 from Rec 709 to Rec 709. Now, the thing about color grading that a lot of people actually misunderstand is the fact that before you start thinking about, oh, making your videos look like Tenant or making your videos look like Dune or something, you have to first make all the footages work seamlessly, go to a very usable state, which we like to call color balancing. If you've actually been using DaVinci Resolve previous to it, I'm sure, or like I say, I'm 80% sure you're probably not doing it the right way. And let me show you how to do it the right way. So we're going to add 3 nodes by pressing Alt S. 1, 2, add 2 more. Also, you can see that I've labeled all the color space transforms to CST in, and then you have CST out, which is color space transform in, color space out, so we can track what things are. For our 3 node, we're going to call this first one exposure. The next one, we're going to call it balance, and then the last one, we're going to call it contrast. These are the 3 fundamental nodes that can make sure that any clip you have, you bring it to the most usable state possible. And let me show you how. I usually start my grading for my contrast node, which is kind of, counterintuitive, but here's why. When you come to your pivot, you're going to set your pivot to 0.336. This is because you're trying to match it for middle gray. Middle gray is a point in color where no matter what happens, everything looks consistent. To be honest, I feel like I just said nonsense. But the point is, you want to be moving your colors around middle gray. As I'm moving my contrast, everything is moving across a certain region. That's too far, but then. So I'm going to adjust my contrast, just trying to look at the image and get it to a sweet spot. I'm just looking at the contrast. Don't worry about it getting too bright at this point. You just want to tweak it a bit just to add some depth, because the contrast is actually what adds a bunch of separation between the highlights and the shadows. If you look at this, if you look at your waveform down here, you can see that as I'm doing it, it's spreading out around this line here, spreading around here, because that's where the pivot I put is. So that's what the contrast is for, to add a form of separation. Now you're going to come back to your exposure, and for your exposure, you're not going to use your offset, which is what most people use. You're not going to use that because this is going to move things in a logarithmic space. And a logarithmic space basically means that things don't happen evenly across the footage, which is not photometrically correct. Hey, almost see grammar. Which is not photometrically correct. So you want to do it in a linear space. Linear basically means that everything happens from beginning to the end equally. So to do that, you're going to move to your HDR wheels here, and you're going to use your global wheels. So I'm going to step this down just a bit because I feel it's a bit high. Let's do like -1. If you look at the exposure I've done, if I turn off these 2 nodes, this is where I'm coming from, this is where we're at now. As a matter of fact, if I turn off the contrast node now, you can see that it's adding that depth just a little bit, just what you need. Can you see? Adding that depth, separating him from the highlights and shadows, just pushing them enough. And now I've pressed everything down, making everything look good. If I put my cursor on his face, you can see that we're going to look at the skin tone line, which is down here. And we're going to see how well does he sit on the skin tone line. Let's move forward just a tiny bit. You can see that he's sitting fairly consistently on the skin tone line. I see. And that's all you need. You don't need it to be straight on the dots, but you need it to be good enough that anywhere on the skin you touch, part of that circle touches the skin tone line. That's all you need, and you're good to go. Let's move to the next shot here. Let's try and do the exact same thing to the balance. If I copy and paste this, apply grade. Let's move to a sweet spot on this footage, something around here. Let me switch off here, and I turn this on. I've applied the grade by right-clicking on this one and saying apply grade. It applies whatever I've done there to this one. So technically, you can see that what I've done there doesn't exactly transfer to this one, especially because of the exposure. So if I turn off the exposure and the contrast, you can see that this image was towards a brighter end compared to my other image, which was my brother, by the way. So I've applied the contrast, but the exposure, I need to take it a bit more down. So I'm going to do maybe -2. And this is giving this kind of alright vibe. I might want to raise it up just a tiny bit, maybe like -1.5. So this is where we're coming from. This is where we're at now. And this is looking good. It's looking good. You can take things one step further by trying to maybe gauge it yourself and try to mount this, but these things are actually looking good. If you look at their skin tones are looking good and on point. Let's move on to another clip. Let's use this one precisely. So if I do exactly what I did the last time, which was to adjust my contrast first, just push it just a bit, and I come down to my exposure. Now, if I come down to my exposure, I come down here and I stop by -1. Let's see how that looks. -1. It looks fairly reasonable. Let's try -2. And now it's looking better. So I want to point out something here, which is towards the balance. So if I put the cursor on his face, you can see that as much as it is on the skin tone line, it is actually leaning towards the edge more compared to the other clips that we just looked at. And that's because the white balance was slightly off. So a way to fix that is come to the balance node here. And some people be like, oh, let's do the temp, trying to adjust it and shift it a bit, or try to use your tint to do some shifting. But the truth is, this is technically wrong. I mean, the tools are there for a reason, but they don't exactly work the same way every single time. The correct way to do it is to do it in a linear space, similar to how we did it in exposure. But this one, we're going to do it in a slightly different way. And that simple way to do it is by coming to your balance. You right click on your balance node here. We're going to come down to your gamma here. And you're going to go up and click on linear. Now, you're going to be working it in a linear space. So initially, your primaries here, this your log wheels, this your primary wheels, were working in a logarithmic space. But now you're going to work in a linear space. So instead of affecting our offsets, we're going to tweak our gain just a tiny bit. So if I look at his skin is leaning towards the blue quadrant more than is leaning towards the reds. So I can come and subtract just a tiny bit of blue here to shift it back. You can see how it's moving back. So I'm going to shift it like minus 0.90 and I'm going to check it again. Okay, it's as if we're getting there. We're getting there. Also, I'm looking at the image itself to see what colors are changing on the image. Those of you that have a keen eye, I'll probably say that I've introduced some form of green into it. So I'm going to subtract a bit of green just to push it back down. So this is where I'm coming from. Can you see? It was, now that you actually did that, you can see that the image was a bit blue before. And now it's having this proper warm tone that it actually was. And if I put my cursor on the skin, you can see that before, after. Do you understand? I can tweak it just a tiny bit more. And now the skin tone is looking perfect. Subtract a bit of red, just a tiny bit. But we should be fine. So before and after. And this is basically what you're going to do. And if you look at the other clip that's similar to this clip, if I move to a sweet spot somewhere like here, let's try somewhere here. And I look at his skin here. If I look at this, can you see? And it's looking reasonably good. Subtract a bit of the reds. Back again towards the blue region. Just tiny bits. So we're coming from completely blue to perfect skin tone. I mean, not 100% perfect, but good enough for everything you need. Look at this dark person here. Also looking good. Everybody's looking good. Let me do this for the rest of all the other footages. If I come to the Blackmagic clip, let's do the exact same thing. You can see that this image is already blue from the beginning. So if I do before and after, you can see that the image is already blue. Now, her skin tone is not sitting on the skin tone line. Even when I turn things off and on, you can see that. So if I apply my contrast, add a bit of depth, it's looking too dark. We're going to add a bit of exposure here. We're going to do a boost. Looking good. So I've increased it by 1 and she's much more exposed. Now let's try 0.5. Now I think, yeah, 0.5 is better than from where we're coming from. Just 0.5 because I'm sure it wasn't really like a bright day. So let's like a 0.8 or something. Looking good. So before and after, looking good. But now you can see that her skin tone is, I like to use the word clapped because she's really, we're leaning towards a bluer tint. So if I come here with the knowledge that we already have and I come here to my gain and I subtract the blue and I shift her back to the center. So I'm shifting and you can see that her skin is starting to look more like what is meant to look. It's having this greenish vibe to it now. We're going to subtract that green just a tiny bit. Subtract it. We're not really trying to neutralize the clip because the truth is it was shot in snowy environment. So it's most likely blue from the camera. But you don't really want it to look too blue. Do you understand what I'm saying? You want it to still have some realism. And the snow, I mean, snow is white, not blue. So that's probably why everything was like kind of messed up. It's kind of hard for camera sometimes. So looking from where we came from, so look at this, from this complete blue to a much more presentable skin tone, as you can see. Nobody's going to tell you this looks bad. I mean, this is where I'm coming from. If I turn off all this, before, after, looking good. Now I want to touch on something briefly, which is about recovery highlights, to be precise. When it gets under the sun, his face gets a little bit too bright. We're losing some form of information here. You can see it's clipping at the top of the waveform. So there's a cheat code I like to use, which is by press Shift S to make a serial before node on your right. Click here and say add a node serial before, which is Shift S. And I rename this clip and call it highlight. That is kind of like towards the advanced end. We're going to come here to our qualifiers here. We're going to turn this off, turn this to off, and we're going to adjust our low end. You can press Shift H or come here and press this to turn this on. So you adjust your low end until all you have is the bright region. You come to your soft and maybe make it 5, soft at 5, and then you adjust this a bit. So it just picks mainly the bright regions of your footage, because that's all you really want to tweak at this point. So if you press Shift H, you come back, and then you come back to your HDR reels, because remember, we're going to, anytime we're adjusting highlights, we're going to be using linear color space. So under the global, -1. And see, I've just recovered something that was rather lost. I see that, step down, and now he looks better. You can tweak the sample space. You can tweak it. This is too much, obviously. So you tweak it a bit. Look at it and just tweak it to make sure that it looks very good. Not too much, looks perfect. So before, after. And now you can copy this node and apply it somewhere like here that you had a very similar problem. Shift S, we apply the node here. You can see that the extremely bright areas of their face, like here, this is covering too much, so you adjust it a bit. So it only covers the very bright areas like his shirt now, for instance. So we turn that back on. So before, after, you've restored some information. Let's do that one more time for this clip here. Although I feel like this clip is actually perfect the way it is. Shift S, Ctrl V. You can look at what is affecting precisely. You bring it down a tiny bit to affect only the very bright areas. See, you've just restored just a tiny bit, and this is really optional. And to be honest, I like it the way it's actually overexposed here. Let's move to this clip here. If I come here, doing the exact same thing for this one, Shift S, apply the exact same thing. Now you can see that the sky that was once lost is back. Guys, it's like magic. And it has this like HDR feel where everything just feels beautiful. It's no longer, see his face here, it's no longer just unnecessarily blown out. Because now you have enough, see what I'm selecting. All the bright areas are selected. And boom, nice step down. Let's move to this Samsung clip here. Everything is looking good for the most part. Let's move closer to, let's find a nice, yeah, and yes, I actually recorded this on my S20. I saw the fire and I was like, oh, cool shot. So yeah, applied my contrast, my exposure, nice step down here. How many was this? This was by -1. I could do like a -1.5 to have that pulled back. And then for the highlights, I could do just a bit of highlight recovery, nothing too serious, because I mean, everything is basically fire, which is bright. So I don't really think you need it, but you could do it. And then if you look at the playback, the fire looks good. If you look at where we're coming from, boom, this is where we were, and then this is where we're at. So yeah, very good. And it's looking really nice. Now, I do want to mention something when it comes to the balancing. Sometimes you might want to focus, like for instance, when we were balancing with clips that didn't really have white on them, we're balancing based off the skin. But then for clips that had white, which were like that blue one from the Blackmagic one, we're trying to contemplate, okay, what's the sweet spot between the white and the skin in such a way that we don't completely remove the blue that was there, because that might actually be the overcast of that day. But then we still retain enough of the skin and enough of the white, just giving like a balance. So that's what you need your discretion and your eyes to see and find a sweet spot between all of them. Moving on, we're going to talk about saturation. Now, when you talk about saturation, we're talking about adding those hues, those colors, we're increasing the values, adding more of them. I mean, I feel my definition is not 100%, but you get my point. Just increasing a bunch of them. Now, let's use this clip. I've done a bit of transformation, just a clip with contrast and exposure. Now, what if I tell you that there's a wrong and right way to do saturation? And the normal way you see is actually the wrong way. And let me explain. So when you come to, let's say, create a new node, I'm choosing this clip here. I've done a bit of exposure and some contrast. So I've created a saturation node. If I come to my log with my primaries here and I touch the saturation here and I try and boost things, you can see that, first of all, it's extremely sensitive. As I'm pushing things, you can see that our hand is getting bright, like it's getting the saturation before the rest, before the green even sees any tiny bit of saturation. And that's really not dope. I'm telling you, that's like, I mean, you don't really want that. Maybe that's what you want, lucky you, but that's not good. So you want to say, okay, let's try the ones from the linear color space, because I said the log wasn't working. So let's try the linear. So if I come here and I try to boost the saturation here, similar to the last one, because it's having a better response here, which is like I can move further without having that much damage, but it's still not as good. There's also another method some people could use, which is to come down here and use their hue versus sat and maybe lift, just like a rough lift, and maybe lift it up a bit maybe form a curve or something. I don't know whatever they want to do, but just use this to lift. And similar to the last one, it really isn't giving a very nice effect. Everything is just very harsh and it's not good. And there are two reasons why this is happening. First of all, those methods are not so great. They have a lot of downsides. Secondly, the footage I'm actually using is a Rec 709 footage, meaning that everything is very pushed out. As you can see from our vector scope or from our waveform, you can see that compared to every other clip we've dealt with, starting from here, this is the only clip that has everything basically touching the tips of everything. Even here, that everything is still out there. It is not like this one. This one, everything is, it's just there. If you look at this other one, so everything is, If you look at the other one, everything is, Do you get my point? So that's the issue. That's another issue with Rec 709 clips. They really do not allow you to express yourself. You don't have that much room to work with. So that's another reason why you don't want to use those methods. Now, what method do you use? You're working on saturation, you come to your color space, and then you're going to click on HSV, which stands for hue, saturation, and vibrance. So you're going to come here. All you need out of the hue, saturation, and vibrance is just the saturation. So you're going to come here, and on our channels, you're going to turn off channel 1, and you're going to turn off channel 3. Now watch this. You're going to come back to your log wheels, and you're going to go to your gamma. And now if I tweak things, can you see that everything responds better than they were responding? Don't use your gain. Your gain is not what you're going to use. You're going to use your gamma. You're going to touch your gamma, and then things will work better than they used to. The truth is that you don't really need to go that far to see the effects. That's the thing. You don't need to go that far to see the effects. So if you look at the greens, very subtle changes. Now, if I apply very similar to, let me copy this. I maybe come to another node, let's say this one. So this clip, if I come down to my saturation, turn it on, you can see how it acts very softly. Look at this. It just acts very softly. The skin doesn't look too tampered. Everything just looks nice and soft. Everything is moving beautifully and equally, just giving a very, very neat transformation. If I come to another clip, let's use maybe this one down here. Let's do the exact same thing. Shift S. I've added the saturation, and it's just giving that nice vibe before, after. Beautiful. And this is what you want to use for your saturation. Now, congratulations if you've made it this far. And if you actually made it far, I don't mind if you smash that subscribe button, drop a like, and drop a comment with your questions and whatever. Because you've actually made it very far, and now we have passed the balancing stage. Now we're moving to creative color grading. This is the part where you try to replicate movies and try to do some fancy things, like maybe make your videos look like Tenet or something like that. So you call this first stage the balancing stage. And the truth is, once you get this, you're set on a good track. Every other thing that you do to your footages will look beautiful. Now, I want to use this opportunity to give you a brief explanation of how these nodes actually work. I should have done it at the beginning, but let me do a brief explanation of how the nodes work. So when you create a serial node, you're basically saying that, okay, whatever happens on this node, let's say I introduce this color, you can see how this color, it now affects the rest of the nodes after it. But if I do a before node, there's nothing happening to this one. Can you see? So it says that, okay, you're collecting information from the last one to make decision on, you're making decision based on the result of the previous node. So if I come here and I maybe tweak this color, moving to red, you can see that all of them move towards that red. So that's basically what serial nodes are. Serial nodes are nodes that they take their input from the previous node. Yes, that's what serial nodes are. And they are good for things like balancing. So from step 1, which is your exposure, down to your balance, to your contrast, is a nice habit to use your serial nodes. But what if I tell you that that's not the only type of nodes you can use? Let's go to this shot here and let's try and do some creative color grading. I'm going to come here and I'm going to come here to add nodes, and I'm going to add a parallel node. Now, the thing about parallel nodes is this. Parallel nodes they work similarly to serial nodes, but what they do is both these two nodes take their information from this node, but then they work independently. So if I come here and I come to my contrast node and I just tweak this, you can see that this node is taking information from here. If I come here and I do something like maybe shift it this direction, you can see that what I've done only affects this node, but it doesn't affect this node. What is affecting this node is whatever happens from this node. So all of them have one source, but they have multiple outputs, so they can work independently, meaning that they're getting the cleanest signal from your already balanced footage. Are you getting my point? So when you're doing your creative grades, you want to have the purest image you can possibly get from your already balanced footage. So you're getting image from here, and then you're taking to your parallel nodes where they're getting from there, and you can do whatever you want to do to all the different layers. There's a big mistake that a lot of beginners make, which completely messes up their looks when they're trying to be creative, which is whenever you're trying to introduce a new color that technically was not in the scene, or you're trying to add a vibe or something, you need to ensure that two things are correct. Number one, your skin tone is correct and your blacks are actually correct. Which is why for our parallel nodes, our first node we're going to be creating is going to be called our blacks. And in bracket, I'm going to put log here for a reason. We're going to come here, our next node, we're going to call it skin. Then our next node here, using Alt P, we're going to call it look. And then our last node here, which is, you can add multiple, but these are the 4 I generally recommend. Our last node here, you're going to right click on it and you're going to call it your curves. So the reason why I'm adding a curves node is because there are multiple ways to kind of apply your look. There are so many people use different tools, whatever. But I'm going to show you 2 different ways to apply your look. Now, using our lift, gamma, and gain, let's try and create a classic teal and orange look. To be honest, I've actually done a tutorial. One of my last videos, I did a full tutorial talking about all the different methods to do this that are exceptional. It's a very dope video. I'd advise you check it after this one. But let's just try and rush things through. So you come down here. We're going to come to our lift, gamma, and gain. We're going to do 0.05. And then 0.05 just to introduce a bit of teal into the footage. Then you're going to come here and maybe do like 1.1 and then another 1.1. Now this is looking a bit greenish, but yeah, I mean, it's coming towards this teal quadrant here. And now you're going to come to your blacks and then you're going to come to your log wheels. You can see this stuff here, log wheels. You're now going to do the opposite of what you've done. So if I do, I mean, the 0.05 here is not exactly the 0.05 there, but it's a good starting point. So minus 0.05 and then minus 0.05. Boom. Now the blacks are much more black. If you come here, right click, show RGB, pick out values. You see, this is where we came from before, after. The blacks are looking much more reasonable, which is actually selling the look more. So before, after, this is actually a very aggressive example, but you can see that it's becoming much better. Now for the skin tone, you can see that the skin tone is actually very much clapped. We're not done. The skin tone is still clapped. So now for this skin tone, there are multiple ways to do this. One way you could do it is by coming down here and using your curves here. So you could do it on the skin tone or in the curves node. And then we'll come to the curves. And then we're just going to go and select the hue, the skin tone hue here. We select it, maybe use editable splines and just try and move it to the center, just a tiny bit, something like this, where it's like getting a bit more traction towards the right skin tone section. Then, mind you, the look that we applied is like very aggressive. Come here under the saturation, just increase it just a tiny bit. You can see how that section is all that is increasing, just the skin tone. So this is one way you could actually restore the skin back. So I could also come down here and reduce the strength of the teal I've applied. So I've reduced the strength by coming to this key section. Under our key output, I stepped it down just a tiny bit. So now if I actually select all these 3 nodes and I do before and after, can you see that I've applied the look and it still looks very reasonable. You can see that his skin is still the right color is meant to be. If I hover on it, you can see that it's on the skin tone line, very reasonably on the skin tone line. I might want to drop down the saturation just a tiny bit. Just drop it down just a tiny bit, something like this. Drop it down just a tiny bit. I reduce the look a bit more because it's very aggressive. Just step it down just a bit more and boom, I select all of them before, after, and that looks good. That looks great in my opinion. So that's one method to actually apply the look. So basically, whatever you do, you just want to ensure that you fix your skin and you fix your black and everything will look good. Let's do one more demo of applying a look. Let's use another method. Let's apply it to this clip. Now I've done a bit of balancing on this one already, which is from here to here. Just nice contrast, the balance from warm to a much more neutral look. Nothing crazy. Now let's come to our look here and let's use our curves this time around to generate the look. So if I come to our curves, I'm going to come here and I could legit just come to our face and pick on our face and try and see what region that sits. That's around here. And then from there, I'm going to come to my blue here and I'm going to say, okay, you are going to increase you a bit. Just bear with me. You increase it just a tiny bit. Just raise it up a bit like this. And then you come, you introduce your green. We're going for like a tenant types of green, kind of like green and orange, that kind of stuff. And then for your reds, you increase the red a bit like this, like the skins remain intact. And then you can come and subtract green from the top here, or you could subtract blue, depending on what fits you. You can subtract blue here and subtract green here too, depending on what your vibe is. And now we've come from here to here. This is another look entirely. Looking good, if you ask me. Looking good. The only thing we're lacking here is a bit of contrast. Like, I'm not having that depth. Aha. We're having a bit more depth. Now we can raise up our exposure just a tiny bit, maybe to like 0.1, or no, to like 0.7. Yeah, from here to here. Looking good. Yeah, 0.5, 0.7. I've opened it just a tiny bit more. So now, if you actually look at her hair has become a bit muddy, in my opinion. It wasn't completely black before, but it's having this like muddy vibe to it, which is not what we want. If I show my RGB picker values from here, you see we're having a somewhat neutral vibe, and now we're basically just done. So you're going to come, similar to what we did last time, we're going to come to our log wheels here, and we're going to try and fix that just a tiny bit by lifting into the black kind of sits at this center here. So if I look at it, can you see the black is, see there? You don't need to be 100%, but it's good practice to lift it up to that point. So if I do before and after of both of them, you can see that the look is still there, despite the fact that I've actually fixed the black. Can you see? It's looking much more presentable. Also looking at her skin, you can see that her skin is still looking good. I could add a bit more life into her skin, which is not necessary in this shot. Just come here, similar to how we did last time, maybe add a bit of saturation using our editable splines like this. Nothing too crazy, just a little bit. And then similarly, we can do it for the hue section. Just pick up the, oh wow. That was very aggressive. Oh yeah, you could pick up the hue section and just play around with it. Editable splines, just lift it up just a tiny bit. You have before, after, just to light up the skin just a tiny bit. And that, my friends, is how you make some creative grades. Let me do some on the iPhone footage here. We're going to copy whatever we did here. Just apply the grade. See, complete difference response. So if I apply the exact same look to this one, you can see that kind of behaving a bit weirdly, because you can see that the top part of the face is getting that kind of like weird orangey reddish vibe, and that's basically from the curve. So basically now that footage was able to bend more, so that I was able to push the red. But here I'll just come back and step down the red here. I can actually just delete this and delete this, and then just be able to walk my red, just lift them up just a tiny bit. Now if I do before and after, I've applied the same till look into the footage. Now it has a DNA, but yet the skin looks beautiful and the blacks look great. Now I'm sure you're thinking, oh yeah, that's all. We've basically cooked a very nice meal. What's next? What's next? Or some of you are about to leave. But before you go, I'm actually about to tell you that that's not all. So coming back to this shot, I want to show you what I like to call shaping of the grade, or shaping of light, because this is actually a fundamental step that a lot of beginners kind of miss, and I wouldn't like you to miss it after watching this video. So we're going to come after our parallel nodes. We're done with this. We're going to come here and we're going to create a new node. I call this node our fixed node, because sometimes you might make some changes and then you want to just like, after everything you've done on your look, you want to just kind of bend it around. But we're not going to do anything on our fixed node. We're going to add another extra node this time around. I'm going to call this node our power windows. Sometimes you can create your power windows before and after, but I like to do mine after. Some people, they do it, maybe they want to adjust someone's eye, they want to do whatever they want to do. I like doing mine at the ending part of when I'm done my look and everything. So for this power grade, I remember for this shot, the light was coming from this region here. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and replicate the shape of the lights. So we're going to come, we're going to create a very large window. We're going to shape it something similar to, we're going to make it soft, and then now we're going to bend it like this, something like this. I make it as big as you please, or something like this. Then you're going to come here, tap inside here. You can actually use your HDR wheels here, since we are trying to be photometrically correct, and then we step it down to like -2, and then you can maybe shrink the size of this and then just move it up a bit more, looking a bit too narrow. Okay, just spread it up a bit just to shape the light. So if I do before, after, you can see the vignette looks good. It's not like the normal vignette that beginners just do. This one is coming, is deliberate, it's coming from an angle for a reason. So I'm pushing it toward this side, so this is like darker side and stuff like that. So you see, coming, and I've shaped it in a very good way. And I turn this off. If I do before, after, the grade is now actually getting towards its finishing stages. Let's move to a Rec 709 clip similar to this one. Let's use this clip here. So similar to the last one, I've added a look on this one. I basically added the same like green look. So before, after, everything is looking good. Now let's park this here. If I was going to do a power grade for this shot, I cannot basically apply, I mean it kind of works, but I can't really apply the same power grade I applied to that last one. I'm just going to look at it. Okay, the light is coming from the right hand side of our face, quite literally. That's where it's coming from. It's coming from the right hand side of our face. So I'm going to try and replicate that light movement with my power window. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to spread it out like I normally do, soft it as much as possible, and we're going to do something like this. Because if you look at her face, it's coming from like a top-down angle like this. So we're going to shape it like this. I'm going to place it around here. We might shrink it down just a tiny bit. We'll come here, invert it, and then we'll come down to our HDR and then -1. Boom. Set it like this. Now this way, if I do like this, before, after, you might want to step it and it says I'm moving it around. It's moving in different ways. So I'm setting it around here where it looks much more realistic. So it steps down the exposure here. Instead of using, like, you remember that time I used a highlight node where I selected a section, the section of extreme, selected a section of just peak brightness 5, and I tailored it down, something like this. If I was to do that here, I'll end up picking basically this, and at this point I'm just going to step it down by like maybe -1. So -1, I've added that kind of like depth to it, and it's looking kind of dope. Like I've recovered all the highlights on her hair and stuff like that. But then when you add the power grade, when you add the power window, when you add the power window and you step it down, maybe just a bit more by like maybe -2, and you place it in the exact right direction, you're able to shape the light and add that depth. Can you see? The focus is now on her face. So if I do this full section now, before, after, and this is looking good, my guys. This is looking good. Now, some of you are thinking, man, this is actually very hard. And do I have to do this every single time? The truth is, you don't have to, because I have a gift for you, which is linked in the description. And it's something I'm calling ColorForge. ColorForge is my power grade I'm going to be releasing for all of you. So it's going to come something like I'm going to release a tutorial later on. But then basically, what you do is you import it into your timeline. The instructions are there. And you're just going to come to your clip section. This is like this one, ColorForge clip. You right click and say apply grade, and then it basically does every single thing I just did actually, and does much more than that. This is all I use for color grading. Any client work I'm doing, this is what I'm using. And it's similar to the last one. If I'm going to walk through, you can see I've already labeled it for you. For the balance node, you don't need to change it again. I've already made it your linear. Everything is done. The contrast is already automatically set to 0.336. All the other nodes are not, just the contrast is. My saturation, you can see, is a compound node. The reason is because I've actually done some extra things, like here, if I want to increase saturation on the gamma, I increase it here a bit. Let's move closer to our face. I increase it here a bit, and then I can do some subtraction here or some increments here using the HSL curve, similar to how I did last one, but then just something I like using. So this is basically my saturation. A very granular way of doing it. If I apply the same look, I could use other tools for applying my look. Maybe I have something like Tetra I use for creating looks sometimes. I can play around with the colors, fix the skin up here, do whatever I want to do. So basically, I've made this power grade everything you need and more, much more than you actually think you need. Everything is inside this power grade. So you see, basically I've done the tweaking and we're back to where we were, similar to how we were last time. And you can obviously the highlight section is here, ready for you. Everything is just there, so you just pick, and it has a bunch more tools like this one for making sure that your clip, like if it was over sharpened because like maybe you're shooting on the phone, you can look at it and it's already selected. Some filters already applied on it to make sure that it looks good at all times. Some little things like that I'll cover in another video. So if you're really interested in seeing that video, you can check it out. But in the meanwhile, this is basically going to cover all the stress. You can do your vignette here, similar to how I just did. You can come here, create the power window. Where is Nengi? Nengi wants to go and play game. I was asking her, where are you? You can come and see this great guy. She's looking creamy, bro. Bro, she's looking neat. Like, Jesus. Yeah. The grade is just dope. This like after like before normal balancing, then just some loops. Apply the teal. Then finish it up with, yeah. And to make things better, you actually have a bunch more. You know, remember when I told you about the whole getting parallel nodes and stuff like that? So you can, if you want to like maybe track her face and do some funny things, I don't know what people do. You can select her face, you do whatever you want to do, maybe like this, and then you can track it. Do it on another node. You track it, it's going to follow her, she moves back, yeah, everything is tracking. And then now you can ensure that her face is properly exposed at every single time. You can soften this, just increase the exposure. See? Increase the exposure. Maybe if that's what you wanted, though. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but if that's what you wanted, it's available for you and you can do it however you please. So now you can see as I move back, turn it on and off, her face is bright at all times because it's trapped. You understand? So yeah, basically, I want to see you guys play around with the tools. There are some other things you can play around with here. There's the lift section, there's the glow section to add that kind of like glow and stuff like that. The lift, everything is like basically fully thought out. I'm making a video about it soon, but till then I want to see what you guys make good use of. Like I want to see you guys play around with it and give me some feedback. For those of you that watched it to this point, actually you can come here and under the post clip, you see I've labeled it properly. So the post clip, you can apply this grade here and then you turn it on. I've put some things for you, like adding some grain and texture to the footage already in a very nice way. Nice amount. I've applied a lot at the ending if you really want that. I've already done the senior conversions for you. I'll talk about this later on, but yeah, I basically cooked a very, very beautiful node tree for you guys, and I hope you guys, can't wait for you guys to test it out and give me feedback and say, oh yeah, I like this, I don't like this, please change this in the next version, yada yada yada. I can't wait to hear you guys say all those stuff on 2.4. So yeah, before and after, looking good. So yeah, please feel free to drop a comment. To be honest with you, my camera is dead now. I know you cannot see my face, so I don't know how to cut off this stuff. But yeah, thank you for reaching this part of the video. I hope you've learned a lot. This should actually be the most in-depth tutorial on color grading from beginners to like pro. I've taught you a lot of things, starting from things like basic color management to making sure that your footage is at a good starting point, down to even look creation, how to ensure that no matter what grade you're doing, it looks good no matter what. If you're having some issues with something, make sure you leave in the comment section. I've also dropped some other tutorials in the comment section where I broke down how I graded, adding a much more stylized look, all those kind of things, and some of my older videos. So make sure you check them out and stay blessed. Yeah, man. I'm finally done. Yeah, this thing crashed like twice, bro. And I probably missed some things because I actually said I was going to say some things, but I missed it. Oh yeah, I think I've gotten the rest of it now. Oh man.